So this is my audience. It's my dad. My mom is in the yellow, and the lovely lady in the brown is Deb, and she's a friend of mine who does the Christian Fellowship here at GCC, and she so willingly decided that she would be part of my audience. So don't laugh. Okay. For my BIO290 class, I decided to do a Roadside Raptor survey. The professor went and lined up different research projects that we could do, but they all involved using or studying plants and microorganisms and stuff, and that's not really my thing. So I decided to study birds at the Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge. And if I call it INWR, don't be alarmed. It's just easier to say INWR. At INWR, I met Heidi Kennedy, who is the senior wildlife biologist there, and she gave me a lot of pointers on how to identify different raptors, and she even took me on this study that New York State is doing on short-eared owls, and got me familiar with it. And I contacted the ornithologist from Rockford University, and he gave me a lot of pointers on how to do roadside surveys. There's a lot of planning that goes into raptor surveys that needs to be done ahead of time. You have to choose a good time to do your route and be faithful to it. I chose Tuesdays and Fridays because they work best for me, and 2 hours before sunset, so then I could see raptors that are out in the day and the ones that were out later in the evening. And I had to alternate rotations of my route, clockwise one day and counterclockwise the next. And I had to find 10 sites with good habitat. Dr. Norman actually pointed those out to me, and I had to familiarize myself with the raptor species and equipment just so I wouldn't be fumbling around with stuff when I was trying to do my work. Before I hit the road, I always had to check the weather report and dress accordingly because it can get a bit chilly. And if you're not prepared, it makes raptor surveys pretty much unbearable. You have to have enough gas in your car, obviously. And you don't want to forget the necessary equipment, the binoculars, the rangefinder, the field guide, the GPS unit, clipboard, paper, pen. When looking for the raptors on my route, I had to drive slowly, 45 miles per hour I usually did it, and I had to keep an eye out for raptors between sites, because I was supposed to document all the raptors I saw, and not just the ones on my site. And when I did get to a site, I had to stop for 5 minutes and look for the raptors. I had to scan trees to see if they were perched on things. I had to look in the grass to see if they were hiding in the grass. And I had to listen for raptor calls because they weren't necessarily visible. You also need to record weather information. There's a lot of data that needs to be collected on research projects, and wind speed direction, temperature, and precipitation would all influence whether the raptors would be out or not, so it would be good to take into account and write that down. I also had to get the location, the GPS coordinate for each site, and I had to find the distance to the bird from the site that I was at with a rangefinder and find angles of path. I used north, east, south, west coordinates, but if you're doing a straight line, you can do degrees. 0 degrees, 90 degrees, etc., etc. That helps you find the distance between you and the bird that you can plug into a program later. The more important data to record is the species cited, of course. You can also tell its sex. For the northern harriers and kestrels, males are gray, females are brown. Maturity, the belly on northern harriers is a russet color, and for acceptors like the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk, they have spots when they're young. And morph color can also be applied to rough-tailed and rough-legged hawks. This is a dark morph, it's a light morph. It's just a nice thing to write down in your data. Some more important data to record would be the behavior. If they're flying, perched, feeding, You have to also write down the habitat that the bird is occupying, which would be the most common habitat adjacent to the bird. They might be in a tall tree, but the tree could also be surrounded by a grassy field, and you need to write that down. These are the most common raptors. The acceptors, the butaeus, the falcon, the owl, they're all families, and these are birds located within those. The Cooper's hawk, the sharp-shinned hawk, red-tailed hawk, rough-legged hawk, American kestrel, great horned owl, short-eared owl, the northern harrier, the bald eagle, and the osprey. Those were all ones that I saw on my survey route, and they've all been pictured except for these two, which would be the bald eagle and osprey. And there's always the unavoidable chance of error when doing a survey, but there's techniques, like I mentioned, that help minimize it. The rotations for one, computer programs that can take into judgment the distance between the raptor that you saw. And you always have to remember on a survey that identifying raptors can be tough. They can be flying, they can be hiding in the grass and you can't see them. It can be the wrong season or the wrong time of day, and the bad weather can also have an effect on it. And I hope that everyone else had as good luck on their project as I did, on their project as I did. Thank you. Okay.